Alright, welcome back everyone. I wanted to do a slightly different video here today on the future FT36C Chinese mini skid steer. We've seen them all. This is very similar to like the AGT style. But the video that I wanted to do today was kind of a mini skid steer from China, like these guys are, from like the perspective of an engineer. Mostly in the validation and testing side. So that's kind of the window I'm going to look at this from, just as like a more of a serviceability, usability, not necessarily do they do it the right way, wrong way, yada yada yada, but just a bunch of different things that I've noticed that I think is pretty cool. So I decided I'd do a video on it and see what everyone else thinks. So in short, it's just a lot of lasered out parts and some very well placed design features. So almost everything on this machine can be made just by lasering out some sheet metal, welding a couple pieces together, and so on and so forth. There's no castings or any like really special parts that I've seen on the frame of the machine. And what they do is they'll laser out their side panel here, and then they put these notches or these holes that are also lasered out. And basically all this is to help them align it when they go to weld this together. So they'll laser all their parts out. They'll put everything on like a weld table, probably in some type of primitive jig. And then they, assemble it kind of like a Legos or a Erector set, square everything up, and then weld it all. So when you see these, that's what that is. This is all to help with aligning the different pieces. So from a manufacturability, that's why all these look very similar, is they're literally just the same general design, probably very similar CAD models that are lasered out and welded together. And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that, especially for the price point of, $3,000 to $5,000 for some of these, depending on your size. And it's all pretty straightforward, very simple stuff. I think they have kind of iterated some of their designs based on some of the things like the cooling fan. This one comes the right way. The joysticks, some of the early models I've seen, not personally but on pictures, is they'd have like two sticks here, and they incorporated now more of a joystick style control, more usability stuff. But they're very simple, and there's a beauty in that. I kind of like simple things. Now, even when you go inside the machine, you still see that very basic manufacturability, very basic designs, very sourced or quickly sourced, easily sourced, nothing real custom. Your engine is a pretty standard Rota copycat. The Predators will fit in there. And then your gear pumps, they're just that, it's a gear pump. And if anyone's an AVE fan, you might have learned that all of these hydraulic pumps and motors have standards. So you can see down in here, there's two bolts with that flange. That's a standard size. This bolts here are standard size. Their inputs and outputs are all, -10, -12, whatever it might be, JIC, who knows, O-ring Boss, whatever. But it's all standard, and that's the way they get around, making these things so quick and cheap. There's very little that they have to spend time really designing and engineering. You say, okay, I want a wheel motor down here. Hopefully you can kind of see there, one's down there and one's over here. Now, there's definitely some calculations. Okay, we want to go this fast, this flow, blah, 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 pressure. So once you basically find the size motor, you go to the supplier and say, hey, can I have the CAD model for this motor? And then they give it to you. And then all of a sudden you have the bolt patterns and everything else. And you can make your designs integrate that wheel motor. So very straightforward. And like I said a couple seconds ago, if we look at our control valves, they have the two valves. One's for your right track and bucket controls. One's for your left track, bucket controls, and your auxiliaries. Now that's this machine specifically for the auxiliaries. I've seen some machines where the auxiliary is on the right hand manifold and some have it on the left hand manifold. And there's videos online of people doing this very exact upgrade. So to me, that says these manufacturers have an online presence. I've seen the direct guy on the Facebook pages mentioning what products they're working on and what they're doing. So I know they're taking our feedback, not only because they're in the groups, but also we see them here in the design changes. And when they are this simple, they're quite easy to make revs and changes and everything else. Now, some changes we ask for, like, hey, let's get some higher quality tracks. They're probably not going to go for much for that. That's probably a very expensive change for them to make because they have so many of these already. They're going to have to pay more per piece, and they're going to have to try to get more money out of it. In the flooded market, that's going to be very hard to do. And to them, it's probably not worth the bang. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, because while we complain about it, we've figured out ways to make this work better, whether it's tensioning them more than we should or just checking them periodically. To them, it's not a change they're going to want to make. But if we talk about like the pins and greasing, every pin on this machine is very similar, if not the same pin. A little upfront design work where you use the same, diameters, dimensions, and everything else. All of a sudden, you can buy a pin with a grease zerk for a lot less money than doing the pins without the grease zerk if they're different sizes. And they've made changes there, right? Now they come with the grease zerks. So all these are improvements that I think are well warranted. I don't think anyone's going to complain about it. But, you can tell that's where they put their money. They don't necessarily put their cash and their design changes into things like the hoses. I've seen some machines, they come where the hoses are touching. Some they're in a very bad area. Like on mine, you can kind of see down there where the ground drive hose is practically touching the frame. I should adjust that. But they're not putting money into, the online quality control when they are producing these machines. They're putting it into little changes here and there. But we can also tell that they did not really design these with durability in mind. When it comes to the mounting locations on the main frame for these, they have a relatively small surface area, very standard welds, nothing too fancy. It's a piece of plate that they welded to the main frame with another piece of plate that they welded to that. Now they do have a nice, I'll call it a boss here for the pin and the bushing, but you don't have it out here. So as we, work and use these, we're going to see issues here. This is going to last a lot longer than will out here. That pin is going to put a lot more stress and probably wallow out this side before it does that. And if you get past that and you keep using it, eventually you'll start seeing, everything kind of cracking out in here. I mean, especially in here, you have a square hole with sharp corners, which is a stress concentration. Focus. And then next to that you have weld, and weld is also another location of stress concentration. So if you were to do a lot of work with this machine, many hours in some type of commercial environment, I can see cracks starting here. That's where I would expect to see them first, because it's not really designed with durability in mind. It's manufacturability and how quickly and cheaply can we make these. And for reference, my machine here was built in December of 2024, and I bought it back in February of 2025. So pretty quick turnarounds. And that durability is also evident in the hydraulic system. They have what looks like some needle valves or flow restrictors. I don't really know what they're used for yet. Haven't looked into it. But there's no filter. There's no hydraulic filter. To them, it was not worth the cost. So they would rather, sell it for cheaper. And if we want, the consumer, there's ample opportunities that we could plumb in a hydraulic filter on our own. Now, do I think the systems on here are very susceptible to debris? For durability, yeah. Your gear pumps, you don't want trash in them. You don't want trash in your motors. But there's not like a PFC circuit on here. Our control valves are all manual. So while you don't want a lot of trash and stuff getting in them, you're going to be able to manually power through any bits of chunks of metal or whatever debris gets in there versus like an electric coil, which only has so much pull on the solenoid. Now the track system, or the undercarriage, is another spot that's kind of different between these manufacturers. Some of the early ones that are just the 2-roller tracks, oh hi puppy, that are just the 2-roller tracks, they have a front spindle and a rear spindle, very similar to how this hydraulic motor is, and they're unsupported. So basically, as you put more and more weight, there's risks of those spindles, bending, and then you're going to have a lot more issues. Or on this one, the way the track frame is, this carriage, which supports the weight on those 3 rollers, theoretically, is all a box welded frame that is then welded to the frame at a couple supporting locations. So like this type of design is a lot more sturdy, a lot stronger, probably a little more durable than those that just have the spindles on the front and rear, where the spindles take most of the load. So yeah, from like a serviceability standpoint, they're pretty simple. They're pretty wide open. There's hardly any electronics. There's a little module down there. I think it's more or less for like a low oil cutoff or a hot oil cutoff. But if you watched one of the first videos I did on this for servicing it, you can get in pretty much anything. I don't have to remove a cap to get to the hydraulic pumps on like a full-size skid steer. The oil cooler swings out of the way. It's on actually a pretty decent hinge. You have to make sure these are down to open that up, but that's no big deal. And on this model, the battery, we just swing around, is accessible from the back. So if the machine is dead, battery is dead, all I have to do is take the back panel off and I can get to it. I've seen some of them where you might need to make sure your arms are in a specific location to get this up to get to your battery. But yeah, everything's wide open. Now, if you are to mess in here, you might need some more specialized tools like crow's feet to make your life easier. Otherwise, you just have to remove a couple more things. But again, in my opinion, very, very simple to work on. And then everyone's favorite question when you tell them you're going to buy one of these is, oh, what are you going to do when you break it? What are you going to do for parts? What are you going to do for this? Where are you going to get service manuals? All this fun stuff. In my opinion, there's very few parts that you probably need very specific information on. So let's go through examples. You hit a tree stump, you do something stupid, piece of concrete slide backs and wipes out your hydraulic hose. Say this was a Kubota or a Bobcat. Most likely you're not going to go to the dealership to buy that hose out of service. You'll go to your local hydraulic shop or even that dealership and have that hose made right there in front of you. So any hose in here, it's the same thing applies. As long as I know the size and the diameters, or I take the physical hose with me like so many people do, they're going to make that hose for me as I wait. They might even say, hey, come on back, I'll show you how it's made. It's simple. Now the tubes, yeah, that's going to be a little bit more of a tricky situation. This one in here, which I believe is for the case drain, the routing is not the best. It is, up against the frame. If this tweaks, it's not the best. Don't get me wrong, it's not the most thought out, but that'll cause some issues. But in a pinch, I can go and get a hose made that I can take from this fitting back here and route that hose in very similar similar location, probably zip tying it to these hoses or tubes, and then I'm back in business. So, these tubes and those tubes are the only tubes really that are going to be an issue if you fail them. If you fail tubes in here like these, again, this is a very easy tube that you can replace with a hose. There's a lot less items that would catch the hose, so that's why typically tubes are more favorable in exterior locations or in harsh conditions, because they're a little more durable. Let's say you have an issue with your hydraulic pump. and you know, you're just not getting the flow or the power out of it anymore, you can take that pump apart. Again, take it down to your local hydraulic shop. Now, Pennsylvania here, there's probably 2 to 3 really well-known boilers and really good shops near me. So, you know, maybe I'm a little biased and jaded by that, but I don't think it'd be very difficult for you to find this pump online and order it through a different supplier, or even if you wanted to, you can upgrade it, because like I said, it's all standards. You just got to find the flange type, the splines, and rough flows. Same methodology for your wheel motors. You know, it's probably a very common part, because the more of them that are out there, the cheaper the piece part, because that's how all these suppliers work. You know, even where I work, we might go through an activity, and if we can make that motor work in a different location that has a different type of motor, we'd rather do that, because we can probably get a cost savings by giving that supplier more business. So, my opinion again, I don't think these manufacturers, these Chinese skid steers, are buying very proprietary motors. They're probably looking for whoever has the best price out there on the market. Now, yes, the Chinese market, probably a little bit more work to find them here, but it's honestly, it's probably a copycat of like an Eaton or a Danfoss pump anyway, or motor, sorry. The cooler, yeah, that might be a little more difficult. It is nice, it bolts in there. If you really wanted to and you really were in a pinch, you probably could have a shop rebuild it, or you could look for alternative. You know, if we go to the truck world, there's parts for everything. You know, Mishimoto might even start making things for these, who knows. But also, if you look hard enough, I've not spent the time to do it yet, you can probably find a manufacturer tag or a part number on these things, and then you can sort of source them from there. And then lastly, like your hydraulic cylinders, they're pretty standard as well. If you fail like the packing in them, you probably take it to your local hydraulic shop and get them to repack it for you. Honestly, you could probably also try to take some measurements and source one online. Now, you're going to be down a lot more than just running to your local dealership, putting a parts order, possibly having it next day aired, and having it tomorrow. Maybe they'd have it on the shelf, but again, I think that's why these really aren't catered towards the commercial buyers, commercial owners. It's really more homeowners. It's, you know, if this machine breaks down on me tonight, that's fine. I can probably wait till the weekend to start using it again. But if I'm at John Doe's house doing a project with it and it breaks down, it's probably not going to work out well for me in the long run if I'd say, sorry, I'll be back Friday when I get my machine running again. And that's kind of where the big names come into play, and that's where they're thriving. That reliability, that known reliability, that, you know, 1,000+ hours on those machines, you know, second, third owners, that's what they're for. And that's what you're paying for. You're paying for that reliability and that forethought and that validation on that product. So for example, if I was working for this manufacturer in the validation side and testing it, you know, I would see something like this K-string line that goes down underneath, contacts the boom right around there, has some really weird bends to it, comes back up through here, is secured again, and is really in a bad spot when these booms start walking. You know, something like that, you would write up the issue saying, hey, we need to change the routing of this. The supplier says, okay, let's see what we can do. Next thing you know, Rev B, this hose now is probably sitting up top here and just runs down over top one of these in a secondary hose clamp. Probably a little less line, a little less bends, a little less complicated, a couple more parts for your hose clamps, but all in all, it's a more robust design. And that's what you pay for when you buy those bigger names. One other thing on these is counterweights. A lot of people add counterweights to them. I have plans to add counterweights to this, but a little word of caution, right? If you put a really heavy load out here and this starts lifting up, even though your hydraulics can take it, you're just shortening the life of everything else. I mean, this will probably do, I'm just spitballing numbers, right? Say this can do 10,000 cycles as it sits, up, down, up, down, up, down, with the rated capacity of 770 pounds. After 10,000 cycles, all this is worn out. Now, if you go and put a bunch of weight back here, you put your biggest operator, and now you're lifting like 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, you're probably like half. You know, you can only get 5,000 cycles. So there's a risk reward for that. And then also they're tippy. So when I add my weights, I'm going to add them down low as possible. So that way I get my weight low on side hills and everything else is less tippy. Another thing I thought to do is I have a lot of open space in there. Thinking about maybe putting a couple weights down in there. Again, getting that center of gravity as low as I can, because that's what's going to help you on the side hills. That's what's going to help you when you get that load up in the air. It's making sure that your weight is as low as it can be and within the side of the tracks. And the engines, of course, you know, I know now with like some of the Durettes, you can get like Honda engines. And the bigger ones, you can get the Kubota 3 cylinders in them, so that they're starting to produce these at a next quality level up with those quality name components. But there's still a market out there for these cheap ones with the copycat Rota engines, Predator engines, whatever they are, don't really care. But that's, like I said, there's a market, they're selling them. I have one, you guys have them. They're all over the marketplace. They're at all the auctions, and at every auction they're always selling. So people are buying them regardless of the shortcomings. So yeah, that's my opinion as an engineer on these. I really enjoy this. I think they're really cool, especially like I said, bought mine for $3,100, a little bit extra after all the auction fees, but you really can't get into something like this until you get to like 10 grand, and that's where you're looking at these used Dingos that have 1,000, 1,500 hours on them. Maybe their second engine, their tracks are worn out, the pins are probably walloped, and you got to do a lot of work to them. But for these, you know, chest height, it's a pretty small machine. And, you know, part of the reason I bought it was working in my shop. You know, I'm going to buy a set of forks here this week, if all works out, and I'll be able to use it to lift components around my shop, help lift, you know, maybe not a truck bed, but like if I had to take the axle out, the axle, transmission, transfer case, stuff like that. My other hobby is little tractor parts, lifting that around. And in here, I mean, if I step back, it really looks small. And honestly, it is small. They're a very small machine. But for me, it's perfect. I can wiggle around in here. I can get every which way. I can get to my tools. I can get to the shelvings on the sides. I can move things around. I mean, look at Puppy. She's not that much smaller. So, and then even my projects, it's small, but still, as you saw in some of these other videos, you know, I can still scrape up all the gravel out of my poor driveway to use for my walkway. I can still do all the dirt work to dig out for my walkway. I can still bust through the roots. You know, I can still run into that pile of gravel and load up a full bucket. Not too tippy at all. I can step off, it's still perfectly stable. Going up and over like the curb now kind of sucks because of the rollers, but either way, that's temporary items. So yeah, if you're thinking about buying one of these, I would not let you're not going to be able to get parts, they're not going to be very reliable, you're not going to be able to work on it, there's no dealer support. I really wouldn't let that bother you to an extent, as long as you're not trying to use this for commercial stuff. Now, if you want to take the risk, rent it out, maybe I want to try to do that. I think it's worth it. Am I going to put a bunch of hours on it first before I rent it out so I know what may or may not go wrong? Absolutely. But for the homeowner like me, you know, shop owner, going to use it mostly for the forks once the outside projects are done anyway, I think they're great machines. You can't beat the price point. And when it's 8 o'clock at night and I go find that marketplace item and I have to unload it before the next morning to go to work, this is going to make that a lot easier than trying to do something with an engine hoist or some sketchy ramp situation or trying to go borrow a machine or even having to rent one. So for that alone, I think just the capabilities of what these offer you, the price point is well worth it. And on a side note, as of end of March 2025, I think the price of these will continue to drop because the market is so flooded. All the auctions have them, all the auctions are selling them, all the resellers are selling them, the resellers still have them. So I've seen the prices from the resellers just steadily come down as more and more of these sell at auctions. So, but don't wait too long, because then the tariffs are going to happen and the prices will skyrocket. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think I missed, anything you disagree with, anything that you would want to see with this machine coming up in the future. Yeah, let's talk through it. Let's use the comments. Let's help each other out. You know, there's a lot of Facebook groups with these, and every day I see, you know, hey, what about this issue? And people sharing links to the write-ups or the products, and they're just helping people get through it. And I think if these are going to continue to be useful and handy for us, that's what we have to do. So please like, follow, turn the little bell on. Helps the channel out, helps me out. Maybe I can do more with these then. And yeah, I'll keep going with the videos. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.